Hello, everyone. Welcome to Peaceful Prisons podcast. My name is Baylen Parada. With me is Abby Martin
Hey guys.
and Fred Griffin at Prism Way.
Good morning.
Today, we're here to talk about reintegration and creating safe spaces to talk about the difficulties and the challenges, to talk about, the successes and everything that goes with it. So, Fred, excellent to see you today. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you on to have this conversation with us. I want to get into it a little bit. I want to ask you, about your views or your stance on what is your definition of restorative justice, and how does that play into reintegration?
Hmm. So for me, restorative justice is the belief that when a crime is committed, everyone is affected. Not just the person that's responsible, not just the person who was harmed, but their families, law enforcement, the justice system, the community. And so oftentimes when we think about justice, we're just thinking about punishing the person that was harmed and giving the person that, no, punishing the person who committed the harm and giving the person that was harmed a voice. But we don't think about their families. We don't think about the law enforcement officer who had to read the file. We don't think about the EMT who had to respond to it. We don't think about the person in the courtroom who's transcribing everything. So for me, restorative justice is saying that if everyone isn't invited, and I say invited because choosing to heal is a choice, right? So if everyone isn't invited to the table to have a conversation that will promote healing for everyone, then there is no restorative justice because
Mm,
the person responsible and the person who was harmed may reconnect, but the law enforcement person is still having nightmares over the case file that they read. And so now they're projecting that resentment and anger into the next 20 cases that they see. And then we're no longer getting justice now. Now we're getting retaliation and we're getting all of these other things. So for me, it's how do we bring everyone to the table to have a conversation that promotes understanding, that promotes accountability, that promotes rehabilitation, that is trauma informed and humanizing, but it's also like mindful of the fact that like these laws were meant to protect us, not to hurt us. And that's also for the people who have decided to harm people.
yeah, so it's a big picture. It's a lot. It seems like the issue is a lot bigger than most people realize or most people are even aware of. Um, so in what ways can we get together? Can we all have this conversation? How can we all meet somewhere in a safe place, so to speak, and to discuss these topics, these issues, because it impacts so many people.
Um, that's a really loaded question. I think it starts off with like first and foremost, we have to like be willing to look at ourselves first, right? A
Yep.
lot of us have a lot of things to say, but we don't even know that some of us are biased. Some of us are coming with the perspective of our upbringings and our cultures. And for one, we need to first be open minded, right? Like to look at ourselves, know where our blind spots are, or to even know that we have them. So that when we come to the table, now we're looking for information opposed to looking for opposition.
Mm,
Then it's like platforms like this, podcasts and spaces where people are being presented with different narratives, right? Like when
mm,
I was raised with a narrative that I am seen as a threat and I should not interact with people that are not within my norm. That was given to me with good intentions, but it also damaged me because what it did was it stopped me from having exposure to different cultures, to different standards, to different morals. So being raised in a criminal mindset, I developed like an antisocial personality,
mm.
right? So in order for me to even come to spaces, I had to challenge my narrative, which was very difficult. And a lot of the times what we're doing is we're skipping that part and we're coming to the table and these narratives are clashing because we're coming from different parts. Like we live in the same country, but we're experiencing different things based upon like what race we were born in, our economic status, what zone we live in. Like it's just all
Yeah.
these complexities. So how do we create an avenue where people can be exposed to narratives from a safe place, like, right? So someone can watch this podcast at home and be like, oh, wow, I never heard someone speak like that, or I never heard of that concept, or I never even thought of it that way. And then they have a chance to digest it. So let's say they meet one of us in person. Now it's a little bit easier because I'm not being bombarded with like my own prejudice.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it takes a lot of, or at least somewhat, just a willingness to look inside oneself, to not point the finger anymore, to not, displace blame and shame and everything. There's a lot of, and I feel like that's where a lot of the stigma comes from, is just a lack of understanding or unwillingness to look inside oneself and realize that, if we're just a little more open to other people's stories, we can learn so much more about ourselves. You
Yeah.
know. So so what are some ways, or what are some things people are doing these days? Um, uh, Anyone, formerly incarcerated, what are some ways that we're trying to heal and get past some of this trauma?
Mm. Um, yeah, I want to back up a little bit and say,
Yeah.
for whoever's watching this, the reason this conversation is even happening is because people like myself and you understand that we've hurt people, and as a result, we have a responsibility to go out and help others heal, right? And I feel like that's
Right.
important because we're walking into these spaces, and there are people who are still out there hurting because of some of the decisions we either made directly or indirectly influencing other people, right? And I feel like that is the answer, is when you truly feel remorse, not for what you did, for the person that you were, right? Not simply because I made a decision and hurt someone, but because all of these small decisions I made developed this character in me that was okay with hurting someone.
Mm.
Then and only then will you look within yourself and see, okay, I'm the problem. I need to fix this, right? And when you find, or if you find, because for some people the journey is just too overwhelming and they don't follow through, right? Or they just don't meet people like you or Abby who would help them along that journey because you can't do it on your own. Then you find a willingness to help others, right? Like step 12 in any NAAA program is about, once you have a spiritual awakening, you go and share it with other people, right? When I was hurting, I wanted everybody to know I was hurting. Now that
Hmm.
I found peace and I'm smiling, and yes, life still sucks at times, but now that I found a balance and I found purpose, I want everybody else to find purpose. And so
Right.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that a lot of formerly incarcerated people are angry at the world because of the sentences that they were given, right? And there is argument about some of the sentences being like, disproportionate and all these other things. But the reality is, like, for myself, the heaviest sentence I've ever carried is knowing I hurt another human being simply because I was hurt. It wasn't
Mm.
the fact that I was sentenced to 30 years at 16. It wasn't the fact that, oh, I missed all of my 20s. It was the fact that when I realized that because I was sexually abused and didn't get help, I chose and developed a mindset of destructive entitlement. I felt I had the right to go hurt people. That was when I was like, oh, I got to do something about this. Like, I'm not
Mm.
okay. And I feel like these platforms, and why I feel like I was released early, is to come out here and present that narrative. Like
Mm.
there are people who genuinely care, right? Like the organization I work with, 90% of the staff are formerly incarcerated, former LWOPs, former lifers,
Yeah.
just got out. We're mentoring youth. We're going into facilities. We're going into prisons, creating curriculums, providing services. Most of our staff have become peer support specialists, which is um, a new model in the state of California that is highlighting people with lived experience, because we're
Yeah.
realizing that we need mental health, we need substance use treatment, but we need to be also relatable to the person providing the treatment, right?
Right.
And like that's just a scratch of the surface. We just went to New York where I met you, fine gentleman and lady, at a
Mm.
conference in New York where we're speaking on
Right.
panels about the challenges of post incarceration. So like we're getting involved in a movement because we realize that we're the solution.
Mm.
Like we were the problem, so now we're the solution.
Yeah. It's Go ahead.
Oh, can you back up? Um, and explain what LWAP and lifers mean? Like, how can you be a former lifer if
So
you're like,
LWOP is a sentence that's life without the possibility of parole. That means that you are sentenced to die in prison. And a lifer is someone who is sentenced to serve out a certain amount of time before they are eligible to go before the California Board of Prison Hearings panel and be given a shot to prove that they've changed and be released.
so then
Right.
how can you be out of prison if you are LWAP?
So there's a process where you go before a panel and they want you to express remorse, insight, take accountability for your life crime. They want to show um, your awareness of who you were, how you became that person, what you do to change it, and how are you living inside prison and how you intend to live outside of prison. And it's almost like um a thesis in college. Like you have to present all of these things. Like when I went to board, I think I wrote over 173 pages of stuff, right?
Wow.
Whoa.
And yeah, and like when I went, they were like, you know what, Mr. Griffin, thank you because you gave us insight into who you were before you ever sat here. And so like that's why some of us are coming home with like a higher awareness of who we are because we have to do so much self-reflection,
Mhm.
but it's also why we have such a challenge coming home is because like we're so introspective. Like now we're out here in this world and we're dealing with things, and post incarceration syndrome is real, imposter syndrome is real. We dealing with anxiety and all these fears, but like just that process alone of going to the board, it changes you.
Mhm.
While also some people, the family members of the person that they harmed are there.
Oh,
Oof.
wow.
Like some people have like 11 people in the room sitting there listening to what you're saying.
Hmm. And that's tough because it sounds like it's a thorough process of self-examination, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
where you're looking inside yourself and saying, "Look, I was hurt at some point, and maybe I glossed over that healing time, and then I went on to, hurt others because I was damaged in some way." But that introspection, that time taken to look at oneself and to grow and do some healing, um, that's super important. And a lot of I feel like most people, on the outside in society who haven't been incarcerated or even in jail or institution of any kind don't realize how much time you have while you're in there to
Mm-hmm.
to do that work on yourself, to look inside oneself and to relate on some level and to grow. And I'm just so proud you were able to take that to the board and they received
Yeah.
you, welcomely and or warmly, and they, welcomed you, and you're able to get home. That's so important. Is there
Yeah.
anything you would recommend to others who are in that situation still and trying to get out? What would you kind of recommend to them, their families?
Um, so I would say that there's a fine line, right? When you go to board, we
Mm,
have this saying of the board doesn't want to hear excuses; they want to hear the explanation, right?
okay.
And what I mean by that is like I did not go in there and say, "Oh, because I was molested and I grew up a gang member, I committed these crimes." It was because I was molested, I felt these emotions and I had these negative thoughts that I developed these belief systems and made a decision to hurt people. And the reason that's important to highlight is because we're in these spaces where we living in a society where you're either a perpetrator or a responsible person of harm or you're a victim. There's
Hmm.
no in between. And
Yeah.
because of that, there's no accountability, right? And so,
Right.
like, for anyone preparing for the board, for even our family members, like, we have to acknowledge that harm was done to us, but we also have to take responsibility for the decisions we made and our reaction to them because we
Mm-hmm.
didn't have coping skills and because we wasn't aware of trauma, because some of us were unwilling to admit our addiction to a substance abuse or our mental health problems, right? And the reason that's important is because like the process that we went through coming home, formerly incarcerated individuals are judging people who've never been to prison. And
Mm-hmm.
they're judging them because that time that we had to look at ourselves, we've developed a willingness and a threshold to stand within accountability. Like if you put me to a side right now and say, Fred, hey, you were really, really unprofessional with Abby, and like I think you should go apologize. I'm going to sit there, I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to go apologize because I know what that's like. I felt that. I know what accountability is. While people out here who haven't gone to groups, who haven't had a time to introspect because they're full-time mothers and they're working and they're going to school, they would get defensive.
Mm,
They would get offended, right? And so we have the privilege of coming home and like humanizing even people who haven't been to prison.
yeah,
Like it's okay, right? Like you're a single mother. Don't beat yourself up. It's okay. However, we have these resources. Let us help you,
yeah,
right? No one wants to damage their children. No one wants to like be a gang member. These are negative coping skills that we pick up because life is just overwhelming and we don't know what to do. We don't know who to turn to.
yeah. That's so true. This time of healing and learning responsibility and learning accountability. A lot of people aren't exposed to it, whether you're incarcerated or not. It applies to everyone in the world, to humans. We all go through the same difficulties. Regardless of your physical and your geographical
Absolutely.
situation, right? So so when we get together and we're able to relate to someone else, when we're able to talk to somebody or hear someone else's story that sounds similar, maybe not in the factual, time and date and age and even gender or whatever, but the emotions and the sense of feeling and growing accountability. When we're able to relate to others like in a circle or just to talk to one other I feel like a lot of growth can be done. A lot of growth can be made.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Sorry, Abby, you got something to say?
Oh, so, no. So I'm just thinking about like when you're talking about restorative justice and you're talking about these times of healing, how can we collectively, you know, relate to people that of our community that think they've never been affected by, the
Mm,
incarceration system, or they don't know anybody that's been incarcerated. It just isn't it's not in their world. How can
mm,
we kind of bridge that gap so that as a community, we're all growing and healing together?
mm,
Um, I think first of all is like show that person compassion, right? Because
mm.
system impacted doesn't just mean someone that's incarcerated. That's someone that's been in a
Right.
foster care. That's someone that's been in a mental institution. That's someone who's been in counseling in school. Like you're impacted by the system, right?
Mm,
But also finding more um, community-based language and inviting people to the space, right? Because what I've noticed is when someone just comes, random person just comes and sit in a healing circle, I have yet to see one person who has not been impacted
mm,
because now they're sharing space. And now it's not on the TV where you can cut it off or you can scroll to the next Netflix series. Like they're in the space and they're seeing and they're feeling humanity, right? Like we are so desensitized, like
yeah.
Instagram and TikTok. Like we're just so used to seeing things on the screen. But when you can get people into these spaces, and
Mm,
these spaces have to be like not only just safe, but they have to be like inclusive, right? Like one of the things that we do at the Prison Way is we create these spaces and we promote not only talking about the positive, but talk about the negative things too. Like get it off your chest. And that's what people say is like we love the fact that if our check-in, someone said they're having a bad day, we don't gloss over that. Okay, tell us
yeah.
about your day. What is it? Oh, you're pissed off about traffic? So am I, right? But I still have a decision to make, right? And people
Mm,
appreciate that because when you don't talk about the negative, it builds, right? The cycle
yeah.
of abuse, tension, explosion, reconciliation, and then like a honeymoon phase. Like these are the things that we've learned inside that we realize everybody's experiencing this.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's just really important to how do we initiate conversations with the intention of promoting understanding instead of trying to prove someone right or wrong? Like
Mm,
all of these conversations are happening. And I think it's really important to realize that we're challenging people's like whole reality, right? Like if I grew up in a household where my family is all freaking district attorneys, and you tell me that the system is broken and inhumane, you're telling me that my life family legacy is not pure or genuine, right? And that's really not what we're saying. What we're saying is people with good intentions are throwing their time and energy into a system that does not promote humanity. It promotes uh, punishment. It promotes retaliation. It promotes shame and guilt. It does not promote growth and healing. It does not promote
Right.
inclusivity. It does not promote community. Even though it says we the people, but even survivors say that the moment the person who harmed them was sentenced, they never heard from the DA again. Like,
Right.
how is that justice? You called me every week when it was trial. You called me every week to make sure I was going to show up to trial. But the moment the trial was over, you left me. And I'm still grieving. I'm still hurting. That's not restorative justice. That's not justice
Sounds
at
like
all.
no. It sounds like the system is using the victim to get the punishment, the conviction done for their, their needs, so they can, they say they can let the community rest and be easy. But as soon as they're finished getting the testimony and getting the sentencing finished, it's like, okay, thank you, you're excused.
Right.
There's no more work. There's no more healing and community inclusion. Like, look, you're a hurt, you're a damaged person. Both people are damaged, the victim
Mhm.
and the perpetrator. They both need healing. And I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of times people don't understand that.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, what we're trying to do is, even in this process, we're trying to humanize even that DA, right? Like, because that
Yeah,
DA was raised up in a system where justice equaled punishment, right?
right.
Like, they even tell the family, like, in order for you to get justice, you have to show up and make sure he never comes home.
Mm,
Where in reality, in order for you to get justice, you should make sure that this person changes so he never does to another family what he's done to you.
right.
That's true justice, right? But, like, let's be honest, right? We're biased. So some people come into these
Mm,
conversations and we're attacking the DA, and we're like, I don't want to attack you. I want to
mm,
inform you that your
right.
intentions may be good, but the system
Mm,
and the practices in which you have are damaging, and you're actually adding to the cycle.
right.
And if you truly are for safety and community, then you will promote more healing. You will promote more victim offender dialogues. You will get involved in these town hall meetings, and you will come to these platforms in these podcasts, and you will have conversations, and you will see
Mm,
that what you're doing is not translating, and that is the goal.
So what would you say, or what would your answer be for people that are brand new to restorative justice, people that maybe have never met an impacted person or think they haven't, right? Um, and they're hearing, these stories, and they're feeling uncomfortable because largely, I think, and I think most of us can agree that learning about other people's lived experiences is uncomfortable, right? Even if it's
Mhm,
just for a few
mhm,
seconds or for a
mhm.
long, prolonged period of time. How can we get over that hump of uncomfortability to where we are, maybe it looks scary, maybe it sounds scary,
Mhm.
but we need to move past that scary part so we can love our brothers and sisters and be a part of the
Right.
community.
I think it's a case by case situation, and a lot of it has to do with shame and guilt, right? Because the average person, when they're hearing these stories, they can't help but say, "Well, fuck, I didn't experience that, and I didn't grow up like that." And so, like, now it's like, damn, am I a horrible human being because the people in my class who I said was loud was really going home to some really bad situations, and I was judging them, right? And so it's really about, like, being trauma informed means that we should also show compassion to the people who are new to this, right? Because it's shocking to
Hmm.
know and to find out that in the number one greatest country in America, we are still experiencing the level of injustice that we are, right?
Yeah.
But we're not trying to attack it. And that, I feel like that's where is it, like, we're not attacking it. What we're saying is the foundation of our judicial system was rooted in shame and guilt and anger and a a lopsided perspective. It did not include everyone. And so what we're saying is, how can we try to build something sustainable on a broken foundation, right?
Mhm.
And so can we have a conversation, and can we find a way to like deal with, you're going to feel shame, you're going to feel guilt, you're going to feel uncomfortable, but let us love you through that, right? Like, show yourself grace. um Remind yourself that you can't go back. You can't go back and then change the things you've done. You can't go back and then change the how you treated the person at the supermarket, or that one time you saw somebody, or you was working and someone said he just got out of prison and you say you didn't want to work. You can't change that.
Mhm.
But we can move forward. Like,
Yeah.
we can actually get involved, and everyone's voices matter, right? And
Mhm.
so once again, it's sharing that space. Like, we've
Yeah.
had people come and say, this makes me really, really uncomfortable. Like, I don't even know why we're having this conversation. The average person would do what? Attack that person. Oh, you feel
Mhm.
that way because no, 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 no. I'm sorry that this is uncomfortable, but now you know what it's like for us,
Yeah.
right? It's uncomfortable for us too, right? Like, I have to live
Mhm.
with the fact that I've harmed someone. You're uncomfortable hearing that I harmed it. I have to live with that.
Yeah.
And what I've seen, Abby, is people respond really, really well to people who do not make excuses for the horrible things they've done.
Mhm.
Like, and I feel like that's important for whoever's watching
Yeah.
not only this episode, but for all of you. Like, we're not making excuses.
Right.
We're trying to give you insight into how we became those people, so that whoever's in your life that may be struggling and may be battling with whatever they're battling in, you can show them just a little bit more grace and a little bit more kindness, and actually get them help before they make a decision like we did.
Mhm. That's so well
Absolutely.
said.
That's
Yeah.
perfect. And that's something that we say all the time at the Peaceful Prisons Project is, hurt people, but healing people heal people. And that
Facts.
being the opposite is so, I mean, it's much more pleasant to hear, but it's also much more pleasant to feel. I mean,
Facts.
when we collectively are healing, we bring that energy into the world. And so I think what you said is so perfect.
Yeah. And it may
It's
be
true.
uncomfortable. It may be uncomfortable at first, to get out of your safety net and your zone of feeling safe and okay. But then when you're able to have that conversation with someone or hear someone and relate, it opens you up to like you said, moving forward in a healing way, knowing that everyone has the choice. Everyone has the choice in how you react to anything that happens to you.
Mm.
You don't have to keep reacting the way you have been before. It's okay to change, you know?
Yeah. And I
So,
think it's important to say it's supposed to be uncomfortable. You know,
yeah.
I had a conversation with someone, and he was telling me, like, Fred, I feel so much shame for what I've done. And I stopped him and I said, listen, you're supposed to. It was a shameful act, right? Like, and and
Mhm.
and also, monsters don't feel shame, right? Like, I've never seen a lion cry over killing an animal ever,
Right.
right? And that's
Yeah.
important, is because, like, most of us say, well, these laws were created for monsters.
Mm.
I have yet to meet someone who was like unredeemable. Like, I have yet to meet it. Maybe they're out there, but I have yet to meet it. So
Mm.
feeling what we feel is part of our humanity. And I feel like that's important to highlight too when people are showing up to these spaces and they feel uncomfortable. You're supposed to. These are heavy topics. But
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is separate the things that make us discomfortable from the people.
Hmm.
You don't have a problem with me, you have a problem with what I've done. So let's talk about what I've done, and can you still see me as a person?
Hmm.
I don't even like what I've done,
Yeah.
right? Like, in all
It's
honesty, I
true.
don't like
Yeah.
that I've hurt people. So when you say, Frey, you were a piece of shit, you know what I'm going to say? You're right. I
Yeah.
was a piece of shit. I'm no longer, but I was. And I can sit here and tell you exactly why, but let's keep it separated. What I
Yeah.
did was horrible. Who I am is not horrible. I'm still a
Right.
human being. I still have dreams. I still have hopes. I still have potential. I still have purpose. And I'm still going to make mistakes moving forward. The difference is I no longer feel I have a right to hurt people.
Right. Exactly. It takes time and courage to be able to do that work on yourself, and it's a daily process. It's a daily practice. Sometimes hourly, where you're having to make these decisions and look inside yourself, saying, "Is this who I am? Am I going to react this way, or is this who I am? Am I going to go
Right.
back and react how I used to?" And it's difficult sometimes finding that balance between, doing so much work on yourself and helping others, but then also just trying to find a good balance between self-care and community, right?
Yes. Yes.
So where do you find that balance? How do you know when and too much giving is detrimental? We know that, you have to be able to take care of your own needs somewhat to where you can help others, right?
Yeah. I'll let you know when I find it. You know what I mean? Because in all honesty, right, like the survivor's remorse that a formerly incarcerated person feels isn't talked about enough. Like, not only did we leave
Mhm.
people behind that we love, but like we've hurt people, and people think we don't think about it, but we do, right? Like
Mhm.
it's always
We
on our
do.
mind, right? And so
Yeah.
that when we don't have a space to talk about that, it creates shame, and then out of shame, I don't feel like I have a right to practice self care, or I have a right to slow
Mm.
down because I'm trying to prove to the people I've harmed that I'm not that person anymore. So that's another importance of creating these spaces, right? Because it's like, if I took someone's life, I can't bring them back from the dead. I'm not Jesus. So it's like, what can I do?
Mhm.
Is like, okay, first and foremost, you cannot burn yourself out, because when you're experiencing burnout, there's a potential that you will harm someone else or yourself.
Right.
Now, notice that's the opposite. Usually they say, oh, in order for you to make amends, you go help other people. Like, no, you have to help yourself first. And that is a societal norm that we're challenging, because being selfish is negative. But in this line of work and in self recovery and self actualization, being selfish is a priority.
It's necessary. It's so important.
Is necessary, because the codependency we picked up in the relationships and all of these, like, addictions that we had, was
Mhm.
because we were so worried about what other people thought that we neglected our own self-image and our own self-esteem and our own self-worth. We have
Mhm.
value because of who we are, not because of what we do, not because of what's in our bank account, not because of the car we wear. Like, all those things are just additions. You have value
Mhm.
simply because you are a human being, beautiful.
Mhm.
How often do we hear that?
Yeah,
Or they
not
tell you
enough.
that when you go buy makeup. Oh, you're a beautiful human being. You should get like better eyeliner, right? Like, they'll tell you that, but it's like, how do we promote that? I'm personally, I've been out a year, and I balance. I struggle with the balance, because like I do feel when people call on me, like I want to be there for everybody, and I have to like
Yeah.
find the courage to be like, I can't do it, and then it hurts. I feel guilt, but
Mhm.
I know enough to know it's okay. Let me love and show myself grace, right? And so,
Mhm.
and that's why, like, I appreciate you guys offering me this opportunity, because when I'm showing up to these spaces, I'm experiencing or have experienced the very things that the people who are in these circles with me are dealing with, right? Like the other day, I had a conversation with a young lady who was sexually abused, and we were talking about forgiveness and how she feels that to forgive the person who abused her would be betraying herself.
Mhm.
And so I was able to tell her, like, hey, I was abused from the age of 6 to 13, and then went from molestation to outright rape. And yet you look at me as a pillar of your community, someone you look up to. She said, yes. I said, so then I am proof that there is life after the abuse.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and said, I didn't think of. And that is what we're promoting. There is life after prison. There is life after abuse. There is life after teenage pregnancy. There is life after all of these things, but it only comes once you decide to not be defined by those labels. Because society wants to throw labels on you. Oh, you're a rape victim. I was a rape victim.
Mhm.
this emphasis on these words because how you see yourself determines how you behave, and how you behave determines how you interact with the people around you. So I just feel like that's important to highlight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's true, you know. You are a survivor, you know. And the things some of us have been through, the things you've been through, it's amazing to see the growth. It's amazing to see you know, the new life essentially.
Right.
Um, it's incredible. And you know, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of everyone going through it and
That's
doing
right.
that work on themselves, and then also doing the work in their communities and support systems, you know. It's also important.
Hey, I gotta come out to Cali. Come see us.
Yeah, we will. We got plans to be out there
Well,
very soon.
Nice, nice.
Yep.
yeah.
Is there anything else, Abby?
No, this was incredible. I feel like we could talk for hours about everything you're doing and the support you're
Yeah.
providing and how amazing it is to see when people are actively healing, how much warmer they become, right?
Mm,
You
Yeah.
know, like now that I know you as a human and a person on a personal level, I just no longer think about kind of that piece of shit phase. I just think like, oh, my buddy Fred. Like,
right,
and
right,
I
right.
think for some of us that maybe are new to this world, that can take all lengths of time, right? But then once you go through the uncomfortable period of, okay, oh, my friend Fred who was in prison, you know, that's once you get through that, the joy and the reward is so much better. It's better than anything that I would ever have thought could be possible. Now I just have a buddy Fred. But
Right.
so you have to get over that uncomfortable phase to see the
Yeah,
light, and the light is so worth it.
That's right. You know, I
definitely.
was just thinking right here, like, man, I grew up in a small city, Watts, and I was taught that white people were a threat to my like survival. And right now, some of my closest friends are white. And people always ask me, like, there was this question asked in CGA. They said, why do races not interact with other races? And, everybody gave their reason. My reason was I did not want to be confronted with the fact that the people who raised me lied to me.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And they were like,
That's
what do you mean by that? And I'm like, well, if they told me that every white person was racist and I ran into a white person that was not racist,
mm,
then I mean they lied to me. And if they lied to me about that, what else did they lie? And I was
mm,
not ready to confront that, right?
Yeah,
I
it's
say that
probably
to say,
uncomfortable.
right? I say
mm,
that to say a lot of people coming into these spaces are dealing with the same exact thing. I was
yeah.
taught that people coming home from prison only wanted money, they are perverts, they are this, they are that, and they run into the space of someone who's compassionate and kind, and what they're confronted with is a decision. I'm going to believe what I see and accept that I have been either living or told a lie, or I'm going to reject this and accept that this is a lie and I'm going to stay within my comfort zone. And
Mm,
that is a different conversation to have about how do we uplift, support someone who's being challenged by 30, 40, 20, 50 years
yeah,
of I've been okay with this narrative and I met
yeah.
one person who shattered it. That
Mm.
is that's a process, right? And
Yeah.
so and it's real, like, and I love it because people tell me they're like, Fred, you're so confrontational, and I am because I know what it's like to lie to myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's incredible that you're able to push through that uncomfortability and push through that fear, because a lot of people would just succumb to it. A lot of people accept it and live in that zone of comfort because they're afraid to push the envelope and just be a little bit uncomfortable for a little while to challenge, you know, beliefs or even to expand their beliefs. Um, so yeah, I feel like the main thing is don't let yourself be ruled by fear, you know.
Yeah.
If you're uncomfortable with something, look at why you're uncomfortable with it. Look at why you're afraid of that. Do a little
Mm-hmm.
work into that and
Yeah.
understand that, maybe it's just you need more understanding. Maybe we need to
Hmm.
talk more. Maybe we need more conversation, you know.
Hmm. Trauma. Like,
Yeah,
don't let trauma ruin your life. Like, honestly, like,
exactly.
I feel like that was one of the biggest things. And I know eventually we're going to have to end this conversation. But I feel like one of the biggest lessons for me was when I learned how to unpack trauma and I got to the root of stuff and I saw that my decisions were being rooted in trauma. I
Hmm.
wasn't okay with it. Right? Like,
Yeah.
we have these phrases about, oh, I want to make informed decisions. Well, if you don't see that your trauma is impacting the type of men you're dating or the type of woman you're chasing after or the type of friends you want your kids to hang around, then you're not informed, right?
Exactly. And
Siri can't tell you that, right? So you have to
yeah.
look, and then Siri pops on my phone. Um, right? Like, you have to look within and be like, okay, this fear I have of dealing with other races has more to do with me looking at my family, right?
Hmm.
Like, oh, okay, let me look at that and realize, like, you know what? Let me try this. And then I'm like, okay, I have more decisions to make. What else am I like hiding from or running from or avoiding? And what you
Hmm.
realize is you never need another substance abuse if you're now able to sit in pain, right? Like, we only
Hmm.
run to substances to avoid pain. So
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
I become comfortable with my pain, I don't need alcohol. I don't need drugs. I don't need to have sex with everybody I meet. I don't need to gamble. I don't need to steal.
Yeah.
Like, so this is how we promote healing, is empowering people to realize you've already survived the worst things you've ever been through.
Hmm.
It's already happened. Your childhood, that
Yeah.
girlfriend that broke your heart in college, that that sports career you thought you had, like, you've already survived it.
Hmm.
Like, let's help you go chase your goals now.
Exactly. And it starts with individuals, and it'll be communities going through this healing. Ideally, it would be cities and nations going through this type of healing, where we can grow in these systems that we've built, these foundations that are essentially cracked and broken. We can
Facts.
rebuild these differently or in a better way. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we're going for. I think we're running short on time, but thank you so much for this conversation, Fred. And thank you, Abby.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
Yeah, incredible conversation. I really want to continue this, do another episode, and keep talking
Yeah.
about this because there's so much we can get into, so much important work that needs to be done around this topic, around these areas of conversation. So thank you once again for being
Well, thank
here.
you for having
Um,
me.
mhm.
We appreciate it.
And yeah, thank you for joining us, Peaceful Prisons Podcast. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a
For
good
sure.
day.